Oh God, what do I want to call it? Yes, we have an election, but it's more almost like a national menstruation that we have every 4 years.
Interesting way to put it, Travis.
Every
Never heard
Well, we
it
go through the
actually put that
cramp,
way.
right? We go through the cramps, we go through the suffering, and every mouthy celebrity in. Hey, everybody, how you doing? Welcome to another edition of Another Nobody with me, Travis Myers. Today we got a very interesting guy named Stephen Bowling. Stephen Bowling is the founder of the Promethium organization over in Stamford, Connecticut, a fraternal organization that promotes the debate of free ideas. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit today about about a bunch of stuff. A little bit about the Constitution, the Electoral College, different political things, and how our country is structured and why it's structured the way that it is. Anyway, no more nonsense from me. Let's talk to Stephen. All right, here we are. Hey, how you doing, Stephen?
I'm doing great.
Good.
How are you,
Good.
Travis?
I'm doing great, man. So good to see you again. It's been a while.
You too.
So, as I just mentioned to our listeners before, okay, Stephen Bowling you are the founder, correct? Of
Yes.
the Prometheum Foundation. Okay.
And Promethium.
I'm sorry?
And the Promethium.
And the
Cool. Yeah.
Promethium. Okay. And the Promethium and the Promethium Foundation are not a political organization. It's not a political club. It is kind of a group of intellectuals who get together to debate all sorts of subjects. And again, the whole idea of it is the free discussion of ideas.
Correct?
Yeah,
free thought, free exchange of ideas. I don't know if we're intellectuals that get together. We're just the Promethium. The Promethium itself is a fraternal organization.
Yes.
Based on something Benjamin Franklin did in the 1700s, the Gento. And the Prometheum Foundation is the organization that we use in our charitable work. And that goes out to high schools and to whomever. We try to bring more awareness to, say, the Constitution, to history. The foundation, we have a after-school program called the Franklin Forum. And
yes.
we go to the high schools and we get them to talk about social, political, philosophical issues, often very difficult issues, but in a very free exchange of ideas. And they're allowed to give their opinion free from repercussions that, you may give your opinion to a teacher and a teacher may not like that opinion. Therefore, you're worried about your grade. There's no grades in this. It's about thought. It's about expressing your thought, thinking through things. And in high school, you don't get that a lot. You talk to your peers, but we bring people from the community to it. So there's older, adults, I guess, to put it with the high school kids. And everybody's on an equal playing field. No one has any more preference than another. All opinions are equal. It's about using your reasoning. And they don't often get to do that. It's a shame. They don't. It's refreshing for them.
Yes.
And they're actually have very good thoughts. They're just a little bit green in them, but they're very good opinions.
Well, I always think that young people, all right, intellectually, if I'm using the right word, their brains are actually absorbing so much faster than ours are. They literally are smarter than we are. The only thing is that they don't have the experience or the education. And when I say education, not even the academic education, just the education of life, the education that life hands.
Experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's what they're lacking. But it's not by any lack of intelligence whatsoever. I like to think, and I do believe that younger people actually are so much more intelligent than we give them credit for. They just haven't learned yet.
Yeah, I think I don't think we give them enough credit in a lot of things. Although I have some reservations about that. But one nice thing about younger thinkers is that they're willing to accept the premise. They're willing to accept the premise and think about it and discuss it. Where you and I are, we're older goats and we're kind of set in our ways in a lot of instances. They're not. You can see them thinking through things, and sometimes they'll change their mind and say, "Wait a minute, that is better." We don't often do that.
Mhm.
any longer. We should. I don't want to be right. I want to be right as in, look, I'm right about this. I want to be correct. I want my opinion to be well reasoned and thought out. So if somebody can show me where I'm wrong, I should be able to say, oh, okay, I'll change my view of that.
Well,
I have new
something
evidence to change my view.
to not to back it up, but just to take a couple of steps back. I first met you at Storyfest in Westport, Connecticut.
Mhm.
I was on a panel, we were talking about books, and it was a great experience for me. I got interviewed by the great Jay Shadler, which was exciting for me because I remember him from when he was on 2020 and all his different, news programs. And we shook hands afterwards, and, you and I talked for a moment before I had to go do the book signing autograph thing. And you were kind enough to invite me to the Promethium. And for everybody that's watching right now on YouTube, obviously, if you're listening, you can't see, but that terrific room that Stephen is sitting in right now is the Promethium. It's way bigger than it looks, and it is a fabulous, fabulous room. But what I really enjoyed, I came and I think what you fellas wanted was to have a real, for lack of a better word, old school police detective come and give his points of view on policing, which I did. And I loved the back and forth that went on after my little speech or presentation, whatever you would call it, and how everybody really dug in and how kind everybody was, how reasonable everybody was, how many people disagreed on different things. Many people had different points of view, but everybody was willing to accept what everybody else said. Didn't have to agree with it, but they accepted it. And I thought that was a truly beautiful thing. Can you want to maybe, because that's basically what you're trying to do with the kids too. When you take it to the kids, you're trying to teach them to do what you guys do on a weekly basis in your club.
Yeah, the Promethium is a group for the intellectually curious. So we try to get speakers on all kinds of issues, and we debate and argue them. And at the end of the night, some of us may be in a passionate disagreement. At the end of the night, you have a drink, you have a cigar, you whatever, and you go on to the next time you hear. And nobody takes it personally, which is very important. And I believe that the founding generation, Franklin and Washington and Adams and Madison, they did discuss things, and they knew how important that was.
Absolutely.
The Americans did. We debated, we discussed, we argued with each other, and we came up with 2 documents to change the political world. And we don't, unfortunately, at least at the time when we're doing this, the climate is still very much prohibitive to debate and argument. And that's not good. If you disagree, people kind of, shun away from you. That's not healthy. We need to talk about issues. And in the Promethium, we do it. And then in high schools, we do it as well. It's important that people think about social and political and philosophical issues. They have to think through them. And you can argue and, use your reasoning, because that's how we make a better society and better laws. We think through things. You shouldn't just accept it. You need to think through it.
Oh,
and too often now we do it we pick a team, unfortunately, and we say, no, my team believes this, even though my team, 4, 8 years, whatever ago, believes something else or said something else.
I have found that over the last, we just went through an election, obviously, maybe 4 months ago. But, this has been going on now for, I don't know, man, 16, 20 years now, where really politics and it absolutely should not be this way. Has become a team sport. We got the red team and we got the blue team. And it might have been, it might as well be, whatever it is, the Giants versus the Cowboys, and they hate each other no matter what. And it's so ridiculous because the things, and I don't want to get super political here, but I know you yourself are a very independent-minded person. And, how often do we see things that were put forth from one administration? Okay, I won't even get into the administration. Well, one administration will say, yes, we have to have A, B, and C, until the next administration gets in, which happens to be of a different color persuasion, again, red or blue, who says, you know what, I kind of like A, B, and C. And then the first guys now hate it, even though they were putting the same stuff through not 4 years ago. simply because they cannot allow the red team or the blue team to have a win. And it's
that's what it's come down to. It's
disgusting. So we end up, and we also end up running on problems. We don't want to fix the problems, or I shouldn't say we, the people, absolutely want to fix these problems, but they don't, because then they lose something to run on. I believe
I do too. And one of the issues I think that, executive orders are, I mean, Washington had executive orders, and you do need them. And
Sure.
even for things like you want the flag at half staff, or you want whatever it is you want, you
Well,
have
you
to
need
have them.
things sometimes to be expedient and to save time, because you don't have time to go through the process. I understand that.
The problem has become, though, is that President A gets in and he does all these things by executive order, which undoes a lot of the things that were done in the previous administration. He leaves office. President B comes in and he undoes all this and puts his own executive orders to undo everything and do other things. President C comes in and undoes all that and then puts in, his orders to do whatever, depending on which party that comes in. That's not healthy. That's not good.
Well,
I don't know what the solution is to that, but it's not healthy.
Well, not only is it not healthy, it's the exact opposite of what our founding fathers wanted with the Constitution and the Senate and the executive branch, et cetera, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're more schooled on this than I am, but now you almost have, a mini king for 3 or 4 years who can put in all of his stuff until the next guy takes over, and then he can change it. Where if it had gone through the proper channels, Congress and the Senate, it would be ratified by all peoples concerned, and we would have laws that could not be changed. Am I right?
Yes, pretty much. And pretty much. I mean, it's we don't want kings. We fought a war on that. We not only physically but philosophically, and we don't want kings. And I believe part of the problem is that because of party politics, and I think there's reasons that we've gotten more along party politics lines as opposed to, not a team mentality, as opposed to that, is because our legislature has kind of abdicated power to the president. The presidency, in my mind, has gotten too powerful. It wasn't meant to be this powerful.
Yes.
The legislature is supposed to be, and is the most powerful body in our system. And because of the party system, which you mentioned earlier, we've kind of said, whatever, if my party's president's in there, whatever he says, goes. If my party's not in there, whatever he says, no, it doesn't go. I got to vote against it. It becomes a rubber stamp.
Yes.
On just from party reasons, not from anything else. And you do get some senators and some congressmen who do the opposite, but not that often.
And not nearly enough either.
It's not nearly enough. It's a shame.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we just recently had a thing, and again, I'm trying not to get political here, but we just recently had a thing where, what was it? I can't remember the exact title, and I know quite often with these bills, they put a lot of nonsense in there that has nothing to do with the title of the bill. Mm. But it was a debate on the deportation of child molesters, and child rapists. And, one party voted completely for it, and the other party, only whatever it was, 50 senators, 50 congressmen voted for it, and then, 160 or something didn't. How in the world could anybody vote against that? How could you possibly vote against something that is about deporting rapists? I mean, it just seems like, again, a done deal. But they do it because of that red-blue mentality thing where they cannot vote. They cannot agree with the other party no matter what the subject. I'm sorry, you look like you want to say something. Spit it out.
Yeah, in fairness, I don't know what was in that legislation, and it could be that there was a whole bunch of other things in there that the parties disagreed on, and they said, "Look, right." So in fairness, I really don't know, because how in the world could you not, could you, vote against sending, how could you not vote for it? But there might have been a lot of other things in there. So in fairness to them, and again, I don't know, but the point is still well taken that Congress votes for things more along the lines of, does my party want it? Is this expedient to us, to whatever the party seems to want? That's for most part appalling to me.
I I find it
it's not always horrible, but for the
no.
most part, it's
I find it criminal behavior, even though
hey,
there's no crime against it. It's just criminal to me. I can't imagine. Let's step back a little bit now, back to the Franklin Foundation. All right. Again, I think I had just mentioned a minute ago, Ben Franklin's one of my favorite guys, man. I really, really like
oh, me too.
everything that I know about him. Why exactly did you decide to name your foundation after Ben Franklin? Was it again just
Well,
because you liked him, or was there something that
yeah,
you for the kids?
I Franklin's one of my favorite characters in history. But he, as I mentioned, we based the Prometheum fraternal group on the Junto, which he started in the 1700s, and he had gotten tradesmen together basically, and they shared ideas. It was for the betterment of their lives. They started libraries and fire departments. We don't start libraries or fire departments, but we do discuss things, which I think was very important to them at the time. And Franklin was just an aside. Franklin was just this incredible marketing genius. I think
Yes,
he apparently he had as a printer he had a wagon, I guess like a wheelbarrow, and it squeaked. It made a good amount of noise as he rolled it in the streets, but he never he never fixed that squeak or anything because he wanted people to know that he was working so hard, and he
correct.
did. He's really an incredible guy. But Franklin, there's a very famous quote, and it's basically he sees the lightning from heaven and the scepter from tyrants, and which I just love that quote. And Prometheus stole fire. Gave fire to man. The Titan Prometheus gave fire to man, kind of knowledge to man. And Franklin stole the fire from the sky with his electricity experiment. So we coined the term Promethium, and that's where the name comes from. And then this discussion is based on Franklin. That's why the Franklin Forum for the high school group is called that. But I just admire that man so much. He just was an incredible guy. I think all the founding fathers were incredible. Even though they had faults and foibles, they were all incredible.
Well, that's the
So,
thing is that when people, well, here you go. You're gonna lead me into something else here. Sadly, today, so many people in our culture, and it's become almost like a fashionable thing to do. Most of them are ignorant, don't know what they're talking about, but want to shit on our founding fathers every day. Excuse my language, but it's exactly what they want to do. And it's a shame because these men were incredible men. They, created all sorts of things that we still use today. They were all great businessmen, military leaders, leaders of men in general, but they all came quite often from common stock. They were hardworking guys. Are these guys not hunted because they wanted to go hunting? They hunted so they could eat. You know, they created things because things needed to be created. They created cities. They built cities, entire cities. These guys did, and the things like again, the United States of America, as many problems as we have, and do we have problems? Absolutely, but it is without a doubt not only the most interesting experiment in human history. It is today, in my opinion, and I think I'm right because I usually do, but it is still the most amazing, freest, most benevolent nation in the history of the world. Can you argue with that? Please, if you got some holes,
no, I couldn't
you
agree
know,
with you more. I think, these men um, created a nation that by far is the most powerful, most successful nation the globe has ever seen. And I know, the Egyptians and stuff had these things, but no one compares to us. And we do have freedom. We do have liberty. At least we for the most part, we have it. And although a lot of people seem to want to take that away, but we do. They created something that was incredible and still continues and has not, that it seems like a lot of people are trying to say that we're the worst thing that ever happened to the world. We are not by far. I mean, we've made mistakes. We've
sure.
done some things that we're not proud of, but on the whole, we've done a hell of a lot for the world.
Oh,
Tremendous amount for the
well,
world.
that's what I mean again about being the most benevolent nation in the history of the world.
Yeah.
Now, we can again sit back here and pick at both of us, and I think we will agree we're both pretty patriotic guys, right? But we could find all kinds of things to pick on the country for, to pick on our history for, from the beginning to the end. But at the end, not the end, to today, all right? But the fact of the matter is would you want to put this power, okay, in the hands of the Soviet Union, in the hands of China, in the hands of any other, dictatorial country? Of course not. Of course not. Because they would not stop. America stopped, okay? And people, of course, will say, oh, well, we still have interests, here and interests there. Well, of course we do, all right? But the thing is, if we're talking, let's say, Guam or Puerto Rico or, any number of other protectorates that we now have, which people want to point to and say that we're somehow colonizing them. No, these countries, although maybe of a military advantage to us, want us to be there because we are their economy. We are their protection. We keep the, Red Chinese and or the Russians and or somebody else from coming over and truly taking over, That's a fact. That's how simple it is. Nobody gives more money, more foreign aid than the United States. If it wasn't for the United States, how many countries who are currently in poverty would be completely destitute? I mean, things like famine now are basically a thing of the past, which is hard to believe, although it may return if things keep going the way they are. But we haven't had true famine in decades anywhere in the world because of our money, our innovations, our power, our willing. I mean, things like AIDS, which was such a thing. People don't realize that, what was his name? President Bush had given more towards AIDS research to Africa than any other nation, than anybody. We pay half of the NATO expense. We do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And people don't realize that.
We're not by any means perfect, but we've done a lot for the world. I think we should all be proud of that. And we should recognize the things that we did incorrectly or that we're not proud of. But there seems to be this in the United States, this bashing of our country that I think is just unreasonable. It's not correct. Again, pointing out where we're wrong on things is there's nothing incorrect about that. That's probably healthy, but we're not the problem of the world.
No,
not at all.
A long shot. I think so much of it too is simply based in ignorance because people don't know. Sadly, don't know history. Not only I don't even mean, American history is very short. Shame on you if you can't figure out the last 250 years and you don't know it. All right, really, truly, shame on you. But even modern history, they have no idea what was going on in the 60s, where so many things changed in the 60s. I mean, like everybody always wants to beat that slavery drum where we at one time held slaves. This is true. The United States of America had slaves. What people don't realize or refuse to realize or refuse to talk about, well, slavery's been around since the dawn of man. Every country's had it. Every person, every people on the world have capitalized on it. But to put it in perspective, okay, the United States of America, from its true birth, in 1776, if you will, all right, what did we have slavery for? 88 years? Am I doing my math right? In that neighborhood? Before it was abolished in the Civil War, which we fought a whole war over to get rid of. Okay? So literally, if my mother-in-law lived to be 89 years old, all of American slavery fit into her lifetime, the length of her life. We abolished slavery within a lifetime. Okay? That's an amazing thing to say, an amazing thing to do.
Yeah, I think that slavery is just an awful, institution that our species put on itself and did to others in our species. But I just think that we're not a lot of people aren't given the whole story, and it's unfortunate. Slavery existed around the world. We didn't invent slavery. We weren't the worst at slavery. That doesn't mean that we get a pass for having slaves, but everybody had pass. I mean, that was the
Absolutely
way
not.
everybody had slaves. That was the way the world was. So to fault, to look back on everybody and say how horrible you are just because if you had slaves and you're the worst person ever, well, that would kind of strike out a lot of the historical figures around the globe. Africa had slaves. They sold slaves. Everybody had them. It just was the way of the world. Again, an unfortunate thing for our species, but, we evolved from it.
Well, and my example, too, was just is, again, a historical example of how ignorant so many people are to the history of it.
Mm.
You know, in the big picture, it literally is a blip on the screen. Not that it
Yeah.
cost, millions of lives, millions of terrible lives, but again, it was a blip on the screen in comparison to world history and the fact that slavery still exists today amongst a large part of the world, including most of Africa, all of the Middle East, in China, still today buys and sells.
You find slavery, yeah.
Exactly.
And the it would have been great if they could have figured it out when they did the Constitution, if they could have done away with it. I mean, and in some ways, shame on the founding fathers in that, because we said, we had this thing, all men are created equal. This philosophical, parts we put in our thought and in the Constitution, and we didn't follow through with it. But there was reasons that we didn't. You had a South that depended on it, good or bad. You wouldn't have had a Constitution. You wouldn't have had a country. They had to do something. It's a shame that we didn't. Maybe that's we really should look at that, and we should understand it. Shame on us that we didn't. But we didn't. That doesn't mean everything else gets thrown out.
Well, correct
me
if I'm wrong too. That when a lot of these things were fought over vigorously during the writing of the Constitution. Okay?
Yeah, there was abolitionists, sure, certainly.
Absolutely. And they fought over it quite a bit, okay? But the biggest concern was keeping the Union together at the time.
To create the Union, basically.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Let me step back.
We had the Articles of
Confederation.
Confederation.
But we were creating a union. And
we did have the Articles of Confederation, so we were kind of, it just wasn't working. The Articles just weren't working.
Yes.
Which is just it was fascinating that why did we come up with the Constitution? Quite honestly, I think it was just the Articles weren't working, so we needed to do something else. And we were at a point where we could reinvent governance, and we did. That was so amazing. We did. We reinvented it. Again, we weren't perfect with it. I wish we did abolish slavery at the time. We didn't, but we still reinvented government, and we gave the freest nation in the world, albeit, we had slavery. It was, again, it's unfortunate and it's ugly, but we got rid of it.
And then what did we have? Again, we've touched on the Constitution a lot. Let's talk a little bit about the Constitution. Well, not so much its creation, but I think the best part of our Constitution, which so many nations still don't have. And I mean, look at, Great Britain, unfortunately what's happening over there at the moment, where their government literally is falling apart because they don't have a solid constitution to stand on. And this is a great nation. Britain is a great nation, but they never had this solid written document that they could stand on like our Constitution. But one of the beauties of our Constitution, and maybe you can enlighten me a little bit more than that, though, is that it is changeable. We've written right into it that we can fix things. It's not made of concrete. It is amendable, if you will.
And what's so interesting about that, too, is that pretty much, I'm not a scholar, and I don't pretend to be, but pretty much, I don't think the difference with our Constitution is that we made it brief. It's a relatively short document. Mm-hmm. When we had everybody pretty much vote on it. People don't realize that. We put it in the newspaper so everybody could read it. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest differences in our Constitution than in any of these other kind of documents before is that you could amend it.
Correct.
You could actually amend it. Mm-hmm. That was huge. That was a big difference. There's something, I've been really thinking a lot about this, but there's the concept of consent of the governed. And I don't think we all realize how important that concept was. And the founding fathers sort of based this on Locke's, Locke kind of championed it, at that time. And we based our system on the consent of the governed, that a government is not legitimate unless the people who are governed by it agree to it.
Yes.
You have to agree that, okay, I'm going to be governed, whatever the people or society has to say, okay, I agree to this. That's where it gets its legitimacy. And that's a really important concept. And our amendability is one of the ways we agree to it continuously. I did a quick video on it. And how do we do that today? How do I consent today? Well, you vote. That's how you decide who's going to make decisions for you. We as a people decide that. You can amend things. You can amend laws. Even the highest law in the land, the Constitution, you can amend it. So that's another way. And the other important part of this, too, that people forget is that you could leave. If I really don't want to be governed by this, I can leave. Prior to this, well, I mean, a lot of places, you couldn't leave the Soviet Union. You couldn't leave Maoist China. I'm not too sure you can, there's a lot of places that you cannot leave. You don't have that choice.
Yes.
So we still do consent to it. I know we don't consent to having this type of government every year, but that would be not feasible. But we still do consent to it, and that is a very important philosophical premise that we put into our document. And being able to amend it is one of the things that we did. And people did really vote on it. It was a plebiscite, is that what they call it? But they really did vote on it. We agreed. They argued about it. They debated about whether the state should accept this constitution that we came up with. And everybody decided to do it. It was consent of the governed, and we consented.
The consent of the governed. The
we
consent
consented.
of the people. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to take a break now, but let me put one more thing out there just before we do. An interesting thing that you just mentioned here, how we can leave. We have the right to leave. All right? And yet, as much as everybody wants to bitch about this country, nobody leaves.
Yeah. People want to get in,
leave.
not leave.
Every 4 years when we have this, oh God, what do I want to call it? Yes, we have an election, but it's more almost like a national menstruation that we have every 4 years. All right. And what happens
interesting way to put it, Travis. Never heard it actually put that way.
Right? We go through the cramps, we go through the suffering, and every, mouthy celebrity in the country who's disagreeing with whoever's coming into power, well, I'm just going to leave the country then, and yet they never do. That also being said, out of the whatever we have now, 8-9 billion people in the world, okay, I bet about 7 billion of them want to move here. Everybody wants to come. Nobody wants to leave. But anyway, let's take a break. We're going to be right back, so don't go away. Listen up. This one's important. As a rule, I never stump for charities because most of them don't hand out as much money as they collect. And that's a sad fact. But not Tunnel to Towers. These guys do the right thing. They have an A+ rating from Charity Watch and a 4-star rating from Charity Navigator. That's like the #1 charity watchdog group, with over 93% going towards the families of veterans and first responders who have lost their lives in the line of duty. For only $11 a month, and it's easy. Just go to t2t.org. That's letter T, number 2, letter T.org, and hit the donate button. Do the right thing, and do good for the families and the veterans and the first responders who do good by you. It's only $11 a month. Thanks, and all the best. Hey everybody, how you doing? We are back. Me and my friend Stephen Bowling here, and where were we? We were just talking about people who are always bitching and wanting to leave the country, but they never do, all right? And just how free we are. Oh, and how, let's get back to our friend, let's talk a little bit more about Ben Franklin. I don't want him to fall off the radar here. We were starting to talk about.
Yeah. One thing prior to that too is that we did become the most powerful country in the globe, and I often wonder, how did we do it? And people say, well, we have 2 coasts. That's important. We have a lot of resources, land. We've got where we were away from the battles of Europe. I think what made us the nation that we are is liberty, is our freedom to do things, our freedom to make mistakes, our freedom to just do whatever. I think that's a big part of it. And it's not, you don't have freedom to do, anything. I can't go out and harm someone, but that liberty actually made this country what it is. And the founding fathers, I believe, knew that. Not that we would become what we did. I don't know if they could have ever imagined that, but they knew that that liberty was important to people. But one of my favorite stories about Franklin, by the way, is Franklin was a loyalist. He was very loyal to the crown. I mean, he wanted to work things out. A lot of people were. He wanted to work things out. And he was a proud Englishman. The problem was that the colonies were looked kind of down on. We were the low life,
the bastard stepchildren,
cousins or whatever you wanted. Yeah, bastard stepchildren that they didn't really want to talk about. We weren't looked on as Englishmen, even though we felt we were Englishmen. And even when they did the taxation, one of the arguments, the one argument we were able to argue legally and philosophically about all the arguments that they had, except for one, that Parliament can do whatever it wants. Mm-hmm. We couldn't get over that argument, and we said you can't tax us because we're just like you can't tax some of the places in England, these little small places. They have representation. They said, well, we do this in our other colonies, and they said, yeah, but you conquered those colonies. We are you.
Correct.
We are you. We are you. We came here. You can't do that to us, and yet they did. And so Franklin goes over to, this is in 1774. Franklin, is in England, and there was a scandal that went on. And I think the governor of Massachusetts and the letters that went, I forget the exact name of it, but a scandal went on. So he's at what's called the Privy Council, and it's the king's advisors there. It's called the cockpit. That was what it was known as. And one of the guys there, the English guys, get up there and just berates Franklin, just goes on a tirade against him. And they knew it was all planned, and they knew it. And there's a very famous portrait of Franklin, and he's standing in there, and he's had his hands behind his back, and he's just looking. And they said at one point he looked back, I think, at people who were supposed to be advising him as lawyers or something, and they're kind of laughing too. And he gets humiliated up there. And he was loyal to the crown. But when he comes back, he basically says, and pardon my language too, is screw you, I'll start my own country. And he did. And he did. He starts his own country. I mean, you gotta love this guy. I mean, and without him getting on board, I'm not too sure it would have happened. He was just integral to everything that we did. I mean, the guy was amazing. I don't think people understand how monumental his experiments in electricity were. I mean,
I'm sorry,
they changed things. It did the lightning rod, which he gave away. He could put a patent on it. He could have made money. He gave it to the world. We don't realize it now because it seems so not a problem, but things burnt down.
Sure.
All things, got hit by lightning and burnt down, and he stopped that.
Entire cities.
Yeah. It was a huge problem, and he found a solution to it. Mm-hmm. And he was a rock star when he went to Europe.
Well, that's one of the things that I really liked about Franklin. And again, so as you say, he's a rock star, right? But here's the times there was no social media, there was no media, period. Well, there was just in the print form, but literally if you were going to get whatever the paper of the day was, it might take days, okay, to come from New York so you could read it in Connecticut where you are, to get up there. There was no high-speed information at all right? But what I liked, and I guess that's just related to his rock stardom, is that everybody read about this man. Everybody knew about this man. And he was not a military man. He was not an adventurer who, went out and wrestled with grizzly bears like a Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett type where, giant stories were created about him. He was just such a brilliant person, okay, who, had, how many dozens and dozens of inventions that we still use today were created by Benjamin Franklin. And then, of course, he had his own printing press where he was able to put out his own papers and pamphlets and information of the day. But the thing that gets me, he was, for lack of a better word, the Elon Musk of his day. If I could put it,
I would. I'm sure. And he did amazing things. If you read a biography, I always tell people, if you read a biography of Franklin, it's like you're going through life with a favorite uncle. He was funny. He was smart. He was adventurous. He just did incredible things like start a country.
Yes.
And he came up with these inventions, and he did experiments in science, and he was curious, and they call him the first American, and rightly so. I mean, he really was. He embodies, I think, the idea of America, of the United States. Just an incredible guy.
And then with all of these guys too, what I liked about him as a whole, and from my limited knowledge and reading and watching documentaries, because I try to keep up on all these old fellas, is how they also collected such a great group of thinkers and actors. And when I say actors, people who actually acted on their thoughts and took care of business. And this small group of men, like you say, created a nation that would turn into the greatest nation in the history of the world.
Yeah, they reinvented government, and not. I mean, all their ideas weren't all original. In fact, a lot of the Constitution was they took kind of the best from the state constitutions at the time.
Mm-hmm.
They looked at what was working, what wasn't, but they did come up with some original things as well. And we basically said, there is no royal blood. Everybody's the same. And, we have a right to govern ourselves. Self-government was a big experiment, the great experiment, as we call the United States.
Mm-hmm.
No one thought it would work. And we did it. And then the whole world went, whoa, uh-oh. Yeah. And they did, a lot of nations didn't think we would do it. You need a monarch. Yeah. I'm not even too sure everybody that we had, that in the United States thought we could do it. And then we did get these group of men in the Constitutional Convention that one committees very seldom do anything that works, but this one did. And you had brilliance in that room, and you had these supernovas in the room. So shining stars, which normally would be the center of attention, don't get as much attention.
Well, there's an old saying that I like. Maybe not everybody's going to get it, but you know what a camel is?
Sure, I think so.
A camel is a horse that was invented by a committee. All right.
Well, pretty much.
We got lucky. We got lucky because
we did.
These fellas, created a thoroughbred. They really did. They built they built the best horse known to man. And again, it still needs to have its shoes changed on occasion. It still needs to be groomed, just like a horse does. But there's no doubt that we do have a thoroughbred here.
And it didn't, it didn't, the document they write, it didn't trust anybody, which I think was good. It didn't trust it didn't trust a legislature. It didn't trust big government. It didn't trust big mobs. It wanted power dissipated. It didn't want anyone to get power. That's why earlier when we were talking about the presidency, I think it's gotten too much power. Some people would argue maybe it doesn't have as much, but I'm not on that camp. I think it's gotten too powerful, and they didn't trust that type of thing. I don't want dictators. I want the argument, the debate.
Let me bring this up to you, because we're talking about the Constitution and the way things work in the country. Also, back to the fact, like I mentioned earlier, we did just go through an election, okay? And every time we go through an election, it is, a side wins and a side loses, and that's the way it always is, and I'm not taking sides here at all. But we also always have the same discussions, again, election after election, where we debate things like the Electoral College, all right, and the legitimacy of the 17th Amendment, which puts, and correct me if I'm wrong now, puts 2 senators in each state equally, correct?
No. The 17th Amendment said that the population had to elect the senator. Before, they were mostly appointed by the state legislature.
Okay. But people,
so we now popularly elect them as opposed to them being appointed.
Correct. But it's based on 2 per state, not the population of the state the way our Congress is.
That was from the beginning.
Correct.
That we put that in the
Let me get your take on it. Obviously, I know what I think, but let me get your take on both. Well, we'll start with the Electoral College. Please.
I think I don't have a problem with the Electoral College. I would rather not mess with it. I think it's worked pretty well all this time. The arguments against it usually are because the party thinks that it's a disadvantage. One party thinks it's a disadvantage, therefore they're against it. It has to be changed. This is awful. The other argument for it is that it's to our advantage. Let's not change it. Shame on both of those arguments. I think it worked pretty well. I think it allows representation for a republic. You
Yes.
do need representation for states that don't have a lot of population, and I think you do get. I think it's more representative than a lot of people claim it to be. I think a popular vote across the nation would be a huge mistake. I
Well,
think that would be a
you and
big
I,
mistake.
then, my friend, you and I are in firm agreement there. And I very much like your point, which again I agree with very much, that it is sadly, okay, frowned upon or smiled upon, depending on how much advantage they can take of it, which should not even be a question. Okay, in that it's there for a reason, and it's there so that somebody who lives, you live in Connecticut yourself, I live in New York, and Connecticut would not have a voice over New York if
Yeah.
the Electoral College did not exist. A state like Wyoming, which I do believe is the lowest populated state in the nation, would have no voice whatsoever. And they need to have a voice. They absolutely have to have a voice, you know? And the Electoral College is the only thing that keeps it fair for the states, because I think what people also fail to realize, and maybe you can expand on this a little bit, is that the United States, in essence, is 50 small countries that are united. We govern ourselves, but we are united under a federal government, okay, that, you know, does have some rules that we all must follow, but the states, for the most part, control the vast majority of their laws and the way you live your
Yeah,
life in that state.
and they of course the federal government seems to have it. The scope of the federal government seems to have encompassed everything now, which I don't think is correct. But basically, states do have some autonomy in a lot of things. They still have to, the law of the land is the Constitution, of course, but then the states have a lot of power. We've kind of lost that power, and I think that was that is a mistake as well. Louis Brandeis was a Supreme Court justice, and I don't know how many states were at the time. There might have been 48 at the time, but anyway, we'll use 50. He said there's 50 great experiments, and that's what it is. We have these great experiments, and if Connecticut puts in a law that that everybody has to wear hats, and everybody goes around in their hats, and it works really well. Everybody's happy. This is great because it stops colds and it stops people losing their hair, whatever it is. Well, the other states says, hey, this was a great idea. Let's adopt it. If that hat law actually, people are actually, they're losing their minds because the hats are too tight and it's not working. This is horrible. The other states don't do it.
Yes.
That is a brilliant part of our system. I don't think people appreciate that as much. Mistakes can be made and it doesn't affect the whole country. And then it's good things can be adopted and mistakes can be avoided.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
important.
Well, and back to your earlier statement, too, about how you are, thanks to our Constitution, allowed to leave our country if you choose to. You are always allowed to leave your state at any time.
Yeah.
If there's
You
a
are.
state that's more attractive to you, you can move to that state. And of course, simply by your vote and by taking part in our government, which nobody does anymore, you can get on your own school boards. You can go for your if you're a small town person, you can run for, political office there. Even if you live in a larger city, you can run for political office there and change things within your community and then within the greater state, as opposed to having to fight against an entire nation.
That's a very good point. And I believe the founders wanted governance as close to the individual as possible.
Yes.
And of course, you do have to have a federal government or a general government, as they called it, but you have to have a federal government because we do have to have certain things that are done collectively like that. But they did want, as you put it, I really can't, as an individual, I can't influence the federal government. There's not anything I can do to influence the federal government. If maybe we're a gazillionaire, maybe I could, but I can't do that. I can influence my state, but not, it's difficult to influence my state, especially if I'm in a rather large state. I can influence my city and I can influence my small area in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Power governance should be close to the individual. We don't want somebody from afar telling us what to do. We had a war over it.
Yes.
it was ironic that we then developed this government that's from afar that does it. But again, you have to have a balance there. I think the problem with I mean, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but one of the things that my friends on the conservative side say is that government's supposed to be small. They want government to be small. Constitution doesn't say how big the size of government should be. It doesn't. It should be the size it should be. And I remind them that the military is government. That's government. I mean,
yes, it is.
Usually you think that should be rather sizable. So therefore, you don't want to, maybe the government, that should be the size it needs to be. It doesn't necessarily should be small. What we did do, I think, is that the framers intended for the scope of government to be very limited, federal government, to be very limited. We have now taken that scope and made it from a very narrow focus to everything. That's where I think the problem comes in. It's not the size, it's the scope of government has gotten all-encompassing, and I don't believe it was meant to do that.
I agree. Because, again, well, it's that broad brush sort of approach where what happens, in where I live in New York or where you live in Connecticut, is so different than what may be happening in Florida, California, Texas, you name it.
Yeah.
Okay, these are, I don't want to say vastly, we're all Americans, but these are different cultures.
I mean, how can that's what the beauty of having a republic is, that people in the Northeast can decide things that are good for them, and people in the Southwest and people in the other corner of the nation can decide things because our lives are very different. We have a constitution that says there are certain things you can't change, you can't do, but you can decide what's better governance for you. That's
when you're raising
plan.
when you're raising your kids today, you can get on your phone or your computer, okay, and find out what states or what counties within each state has the best school system for your children. Okay, maybe for us at our age, all right, we can type in and decide, well, what's the best state to retire in?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
You see, and these are important decisions to make. Now, if they were all exactly the same, might not be so great after all.
Yeah, we don't. It's my friends on the left end of the spectrum seem to think that we can, as a collective, we can create a utopia. It does not exist. Utopia just doesn't exist. It never will. You want people to make up their own minds in certain areas. You don't want to have one rule of everything. It's a disaster. You just don't want that. And have to, right now, half the population likes certain things, the other half hates it. Pick a subject. I mean, it's better done in the States.
I agree. And even then, like I say, even within the states, it breaks down to counties, and then it breaks down to townships, cities, whatever. And every municipality has their own rules. They run things differently. And I think that's the beauty of it. And I think it's foolhardy to go against what was created so long ago. And
they did a brilliant job.
Well, for so long.
Yeah, they did a brilliant job. It's not perfect. So often the left end of the spectrum thinks that the Constitution, for most part, not everybody, but thinks the Constitution is antiquated relic that should be put to the side, and we have to, we can't pay attention to that. They couldn't think of that. And the right so often thinks that this is some sacred document that has magic power somehow. Neither is correct. It is law. It is well-reasoned, well thought out, based on philosophical thought document that works really well. I mean, it's a brilliant document. Well, and it's just law. That's what it is. I mean,
that's what, again, I guess my point, and the point that most of this discussion has been, and I do believe we're very much of like minds here, is the Constitution is the best document, the best law as of today. Yeah, and the beauty of it is that it can still be changed. Don't hate it.
It can be.
Don't hate it. Work on changing the things you don't like if you have things that you don't like.
And I think we've made changes. Oh, what was it? The 18th Amendment, prohibition, right? That was a bad idea. And we changed it. I mean, I think the 17th Amendment. I think the 17th Amendment.
Pick it right up.
Right? Yeah, I think 17th Amendment was a bad idea. I I don't think we thought through it enough. And I know some of the arguments for it were that there was a lot of corruption. I'm not. I I I don't think there was as much corruption as everybody said, and there's still corruption going on. When one of the things with 17 Amendment, just not to get into this, but is that you need a lot of money to run for the Senate. You need a lot of money. Yes. So what it did was allowed special interest groups to get even more influence and more power. And I'm indebted to the party. That's the other thing. I'm now indebted to the party because as a senator, especially, even a congressman, a senator, I need the party behind me to get elected. So I'm going to vote for my president's in there. I'm going to vote for whatever he says. Or the other guy's in there, I'm going to go against it because my party wants it. I need the support. I need the money.
Yeah.
It just allowed, that it allowed bad decisions to be made because there was no one to say no to the people. Yeah. You were now indebted to the passions of the people like the House is, which is supposed to be. But we are in an incredible amount of debt. I mean, it's incredible amount of debt. It's almost unimaginable the amount of debt we're in. Shame. Because no one, the senator's not going to say no. You want to pave the streets in gold? People, we want gold in the street. Of course, I want to get reelected. Of course I'm going to do that.
Let me ask you now, with all these old dogs we have in the Senate and in the Congress as well, what are your views on term limits?
I had an interesting, my thoughts on term limits have an interesting history. I was absolutely for term limits years ago. I said, this is, I even thought that, that brilliant document, the men who made it couldn't foresee this and made a mistake. That there was a flaw, they made a mistake. We need term limits. And then I got slapped in the face by the greatness of these of the people who created this. A House member should go as long as the House member should go. Even a senator should go as long as the senator should go, because if your senator is doing a good job, why would you want term limits? If your House member is doing a good job, why would you want term limits? The problem, though, is the 17th Amendment came along and it sort of changed that whole dynamic, and the problem is that I personally think we should have more Congress people in the House. We limited it to 435, I think it is. I think we just kind of picked that number. Mm-hmm. Why would we limit it? Even George Washington, at the time of the ratification when they were just about to finish the Constitution, writing it, he said, no, we need to increase the size of the Congress. And they did, because he's George Washington. Yes. And just one aside, on George Washington is that he didn't say much during that whole thing. He presided over, but he didn't say much. The reason he didn't say much is because he didn't have to. Everybody did what Washington wanted done, and he got everything he wanted because he was George Washington. He got what he wanted because he was the great George Washington. He didn't have to say anything, which I think is awesome. Akil Reed-Amar, the historian, who I happen to think is a brilliant historian, I read that in one of his books recently, and I just chuckled at that. He didn't have to.
I think I'm going to agree with you on the term limits, in that I too, as a younger man, very much thought, absolutely we have to have term limits. Why not? However, the problem I see with that is twofold. One, the people can vote for whoever they want to vote for. So the people are choosing to keep their congressman and or their senator longer if they're happy with the job, that they're happy with the representation that they have. They should be able to hang on to it as long as they want to. I agree with that you should be able to vote for who you want, and if you vote him in, he's in. Number two, I don't care if you're a senator or a congressman. When you get in there, you're junior. You got to learn how to do this job, And you may not learn it for 2, 3, 4 years if you're a congressman. As a senator, by the end of 6 years, you certainly should know what you're doing, but you may need that second term to get you through, So I think, maybe we don't have term limits, but quite possibly put an age limit on there. So you can no longer. So let's say if it's a 6-year run for senator, maybe once you hit 70, that's your last election. You cannot run a second time, which would take you to 76 years of age. And that's it. You're done. And work it out however we work it out with it. I mean, even for Congress, to tell you the truth, sometimes I don't know, and maybe I'm not educated enough on the subject. I don't think 2 years is enough of a term, personally, because number one, again, you don't know the job, but all they do is try to basically the first day you're in, you're running for re-election.
Yeah, your job mainly is to raise money. That's
exactly
what your job is as a House member.
And
that's
sad
terrible.
because you don't get to do the job that you're supposed to be doing. You're raising money and you're running for re-election almost in the first day.
And the thing is that if you had a lot more a lot more congressmen, I think that would help ameliorate that situation. I think that I think we should triple it. But and the biggest argument I get is that where are you going to put these people? How are you going to fit them? I mean, come on, we can go. We have things on Mars. We split atoms. We're looking, at distances, incredible distances in the universe. We can build a bigger building. That's not a big problem.
Well,
and I think it would take away this a bigger House. I can't go and talk to my House member. I mean, yeah, they might give me the time of day, but then they might do some, because they want constituents.
Anyway.
But I can't do it. There's too many. I think that I think it's 785,000 is the average. When you average it out, that's what each House member has. I think that's too much. Maybe it should be 300,000. I don't think it should be 10,000, but it's too much. We need to be close to the people who are making decisions for us.
I could not agree more.
And even on if you took up 17th Amendment, we didn't vote for senators, and people get aghast when you say that, but it wasn't designed first like that. It wasn't. People, what do you mean? Because they not that they should, but they don't know that history. I'm still connected to the person. I still vote for the person who appoints, the people who appoint that senator. So I'm still connected, but I'm a little bit divorced from them in some ways. So you have a different constituency that looks at things a little bit different. And that makes consensus a little more. We forget all these kind of variables that go into governance. We have a lot of people. You want to, you don't want it to be just special interests deciding something, or the passions of the people deciding something. You want someone. Washington called the Senate the saucer in which we pour the tea to cool. You've got, in the House, you've got, at the moment there's something going on, and everybody wants something, and then the Senate says, hold on, we're supposed to be anyway a deliberative, pensive body. We're going to really think through this to see if this is a good idea. And I'll give you two examples that I always refer to, and both on the left and the right. And Bush 43 went to a war in Iraq. Now, whether you think that was a good idea or not, a lot of people had some disagreements with it, but pretty much everybody voted for it. The Republicans and Democrats all pretty much voted for it. And would the Senate have voted for it if they didn't need to get elected? If they were appointed, they might have said, wait a minute, we need to really look into this. Is this really something that we eventually spent trillions of dollars on? And maybe they would have come up with the same conclusion. I don't know. But they may have really looked at it before. Then it was the passions that people wanted it. I got to get reelected. Sure, I'm for it. And you've had the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare.
Yes.
You had that. I mean, only the prevailing party in the House and Senate voted for it. But it was, how could you vote against your party? You can't, because I need the votes. I need that. Yep. And it might have been, maybe you're for it or maybe you're not, but we might have taken a lot more time to deliberate on how to do it if you think it's a good idea. And it might have been a better thing than it was not. It didn't turn out as good as let's put it that way. It didn't turn out as good. They may have said, no, we can't do this, or we really need to think through this. This is too big of an issue to just kind of push through. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean. We didn't have an independent Senate that could stop things.
Yes.
That's the problem.
Again, and I can't agree with you more. I cannot. Unfortunately, I hate to say it because I don't know any of these people personally, our senators and or congressmen, as nobody does, right? But I, geez, what can I say? I just hate to think that they are all, you know, puppets held by the string of an upcoming election or, you know, how much money they can put in their own pockets. And I do quite often feel that they do not have our best interests at heart. I do.
I don't. I'll go a little easy on them. I don't know. I think they get into a situation where, because the way it is now, where you need to raise a lot of money and to get reelected, you do that, and everything's got to be thinking about reelection, which is unfortunate. I'm not even too sure it's their fault. It's maybe how the system has evolved. And again, I blame a lot of that on the 17th Amendment. I'm not saying that the way we did it was perfect by any means. I just think it was a lot better than how we're doing it now, and it forces these senators and Congress people to again, go more for party politics than for good governance.
Yes.
And not necessarily, sometimes party politics are good governance, but oftentimes
they are not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with that, we have not solved all the problems in the world, my friend. But
give us, the next one, another hour, we'll solve everything.
Yes.
We'll get it.
We'll definitely get together again soon, I hope. All right? We're going to call it here. But before we do, I want to talk about your other side thing, all right?
Yeah.
Which is you are the author of children's books.
Yes.
All right? And I have Winslow Scarecrow here, which is one of a few of your books that I got from my little niece. And I actually read them myself, and I do very much like them, especially Winslow. I picked him because he is a independent thinker himself.
Yes.
All right?
Yeah.
And he's a scarecrow. He's a scarecrow that doesn't want to be mean and scary. Yeah. And the only other scarecrows give him a hard time about it. So how'd you get mixed up in this? Just something you wanted to do?
I had had an idea for a kid's book 20 years ago or so, when it was a Christmas book, and about a Christmas tree who kind of doesn't get picked, and it. Anyway, so I wrote that, and I wrote that in 2000. I wrote it. I actually wrote it and drew it myself, and even bound it to give to a lot of nieces and nephews and stuff. So I gave a lot of them to them, and I didn't have a lot of money at the time. And so about 20 years later, the self-publishing came up, and a friend was doing it, and he said, "Why don't you do it?" And I just decided to. And that one's prose, but the other in rhyming verse. And I like doing it. I just sort of took to it and like it.
Right? The ones I have, I think, really are just little gems. They really are sweet little books. I tell you what, not only will I compliment you on the writing and the story, all right, which is, of course, it is a child's book. It's relatable to children. But the artist, too. What did you get to do with that art? I think it's great art in the ones I have. I don't know if it's the two that I have.
He does all my books.
Artists, and they are terrific.
He does all my books, and in fact, he even did the seal for the Promethium. He's a incredible artist. I was very fortunate.
Vitaly Dudarenko?
Dudarenko, yeah,
right?
Yep.
Great
and
artist.
we have developed. I've never actually spoken to him. We do everything in my email because he doesn't speak English. He understands a lot more than he's shy about it, but he understands probably a lot more. But we have developed this incredible friendship, and I absolutely love the guy, and he's incredible. I'm just fortunate that we work together. He lives in Belarus, and Belarus is it's a difficult time for him because you've got the situations going on there with Russia and Ukraine and everything, and he's a very peaceful man. He's doesn't like all this. It's even difficult to send him money.
Really?
There's only one way to send him money. It's very difficult. But
they don't have
all
a
of that,
simple PayPal or something like that.
No, they don't allow PayPal. They only allow MoneyGram, I think it is. That's the only way I know how to send him money. Not even Western Union can go there anymore. Nothing, And I will come up with an idea and have this book, and I'll kind of write out what maybe I think the picture should look like. He can read my mind, and he comes up with stuff so much better. And he's a true illustrator. I mean, he's more in the Norman Rockwell kind of illustration.
They have the same story for our books. Funny enough, the Tommy Keene Detective Series, our artist Okay, he's out of Connecticut. He's over in your neck of the woods. His name is Fred Rawls. And we hooked up with him through somebody I knew, somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody, and we ended up with this guy, right? And what I do is I give him the idea. I said, this is what I'd like. And I now call it Frederizing, because what I do is I'll send him an idea or a sketch that I'll make, and he'll create, a beautiful cover that fits our theme. And it's interesting because it's just a very similar story to the one you just told.
Yeah, yeah. And it's fun like that. And again, you develop relationships with the artist.
Yeah. I consider him my friend, and yet
me too.
I didn't meet him probably literally for, I don't know, 5-8 years, something like that, of doing different things with him. And then I happened to be in Connecticut, and we were talking about a different project, and we got together and had Chinese food, and it was great.
Yeah. Vitaly just amazes me when he comes up with something that looks like, holy cow, it's good.
Yeah.
And it's much better than I imagined, and that's what's wonderful about it. I have a new one coming out about I always struggle with this, about a guy who yells at the moon, Mr. Foulweather, and he goes out and yells at the moon every night. Kind of autobiography, a grumpy old man, He goes out and yells at the moon. That I'm going to be doing pretty soon, I think.
Well, again, before we leave, any people out there got young ones around, Winslow Scarecrow, I highly recommend it.
And, that's my newest one.
And that's it. That's all I got for you today, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me. It really was a nice conversation. And please come back if you will.
Oh, I appreciate that. It's always great to talk to you, Travis. But I'll come back anytime.
All right, great. Thanks so much, my friend. All the best.
Thank you.
All right, there you have it. My conversation with Stephen Bowling of the Promethium. It's a great organization. If you're anywhere in Connecticut, please do yourselves a favor. Check it out. Until next time, thank you, my friends. And please do the right thing. All right? Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button. All right? So you don't miss any more of this stuff. It's good stuff we're giving to you. And that's it. Until next time, all the best, my friends. Goodbye. Listen up. This one's important. I'd like to try to encourage you, please, to give to the Stephen Siller Foundation, Tunnel to Towers, at T2T.org. That's letter T, number 2, letter T.org. Do good for those who've done good for you.